Hi everyone, I am Sophie Knowles and today I will be talking about the structure and function of estrogen receptor alpha. So first, it is essential to understand what estrogen is in order to understand the receptor. The estrogen is a sex hormone in females. It is responsible for the regulation of the menstrual cycle and reproduction, bone density, and brain function. It is produced in the ovaries, adrenal glands, and adipose tissue. To the right, there is a picture of the three forms of estrogen. So the first one is estradiol, the second one is estrone, and estriol. And the estriol hormone is the major estrogen present in pregnant women, while the estrone is the major estrogen in postmenopausal women, and the estradiol is the major estrogen present in premenopausal women. So estradiol has a main role, and it helps in maintaining the reproductive system, and it has the greatest affinity for the estrogen alpha receptor. So estrogen is the hormone that binds to the estrogen receptors, and the major functions of estrogen are controlled by estrogen receptors, alpha and beta. So there are two subtypes, and that will be discussed in the next slide. So these are the subtypes, so estrogen receptor alpha and beta. They're both nuclear transcription factors, and they're proteins that turn genes on and off to bind to nearby DNA. And some of the key functions, which are many, are they have functions in the reproductive system, the skeletal system, cardiovascular, and central nervous systems, and in tissues. The estrogen receptor alpha is mainly present in the mammary gland, uterus, ovary, bone, male reproductive organs, such as the prostate, liver, and adipose tissue. The estrogen receptor beta is found in the prostate, bladder, ovary, colon, adipose tissue, and immune system. So both of these receptors are expressed in the cardiovascular and central nervous system. So a little bit of background on the estrogen receptor alpha, as that is the main focus of this presentation. So it is activated by estrogen. So when estrogen binds to the receptor, that creates cell proliferation, which creates cancer and the multiplication of cells. So the receptor is located in the nucleus or the cell cytoplasm, and it was discovered by Elwood Jensen in 1958. So it was cloned, which is replication of DNA from breast cancer MCF7 cells in 1986. So this is a picture on the left of Elwood, and there are several clinical applications. So those will be discussed in later slides, but a few are cancer, nerve damage, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and menopause. So first, it's important to know that the estrogen is important in the endocrine system, and because it uses hormones as signals to regulate physiological processes. So as we talked about, estrogen is a hormone that activates the receptor. So on the right is just an example picture of estrogen and testosterone, which is the male hormone. And the estrogen receptor is a transcription factor, and it controls the speed for when genes are transcribed from DNA to mRNA. So one main cause that estrogen receptor has in breast cancer is when the receptor binds and causes the multiplication of cells. So in 2012, 1.7 million women diagnosed with and 521,000 women died from breast cancer. And so this means that when estrogens bind to the receptor, as stated before, that it causes cell proliferation. And this is a very extremely scary thing. So some of the risk factors would be inheritance of inactivating mutation of specific genes, which has the most, that's the greatest risk factor. And the next greatest would be the age, because 3/4 in postmenopausal women experience breast cancer. And other ones would be late menopause, absence of lactation, hormone replacement therapy, and oral contraception, so that's birth control. So here are two pictures of the structure. So in the top left-hand corner is a picture that shows the estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta. So in estrogen receptor alpha, there are 5 domains, along with beta also has 5 domains. And this consists of the A, B, C, D, E, and F. So in the estrogen receptor alpha, it is a lot longer, as you can tell, compared to the beta. So it has 595 amino acids, and the beta has 530. So, and as you can see, it shows that the total size is 67 kilodaltons for the alpha and 59 for the beta. In the bottom right-hand corner, we see also the structure and where some binding sites are. So the next slide will we'll discuss more into detail on the structure. So the estrogen receptor alpha is located on the 6th chromosome, and as we already discussed, that how many amino acids and the molecular size. So it consists of 5 domains, as we've talked about or mentioned, which are the A, B, C, D, E, and F, and F. So we'll go into further details of each one and what it does and how it's used for estrogen receptor. And the main focus is the alpha receptor and not the beta. So the first domain is the AB domain, which is closest to the N-terminal, and it consists of the activation function 1, which contributes to transcription activity. So as you can see, it's the blue portion in the picture on the left-hand corner of the screen, and it contains amino acids which they are targeting of post-transcriptional modifications to raise levels of activation 1 function activity. So for the C domain, this encodes DNA binding, which is located in the center. And this is needed for the sequence-specific binding of estrogen receptors to DNA. So the DBD is just the binding domain, and this is also consists of the regulation expression of target genes. And for the D domain, this is the hinge portion, which sequences to stimulate nuclear localization signaling. This facilitates the post-translational modification of estrogen receptors. This results in the activation of estrogen receptor signaling in cells, which leads to the next domains, which are E and F. So for the E domain, it's closest to the C-terminal region. So in the picture, as you can see, it's highlighted in orange, and the LBD stands for the ligand binding domain and activation function 1. So this is where the estrogen mainly binds to the receptor, which eventually, if there's too much binding, then that can cause cancers and issues between the binding. And this is the interaction site with co-regulators and ligand-dependent activation function 2. So again, this is where the activation happens and where it binds. So also for the F, it's combined with the E, and that affects the activity of estrogen receptors, and the activity in each receptor contribute to the estrogen receptors to control transcription activity of specific target genes. So this is the most important part in the estrogen receptors. So in this picture, this is another one that shows alpha and beta. So the gray portion of the F domain is where the binding has happened, and the estrogen is binded to estrogen receptor. So for the function, the estrogen receptor alpha contains a zinc finger domain, which is in the C domain, and that is basically a small protein motif that binds with estrogen and ligands. And there is a nuclear receptor activated by an estrogen, and it functions to cell multiply and which of breast cancer cells and differentiation in target tissues. So this means that it binds to promoters of key oncogenes. And a fact would be that 70% of breast cancers respond to anti-estrogen therapy, which is targeted to reduce estrogen-driven proliferation. So, as mentioned previously, some clinical applications that will be discussed are cancer, neuropathies, which is nerve damage, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and menopause. So for cancer, as you can see on the picture to the right, there's a normal breast cancer cell which shows the protein receptor binding to the nucleus, and the cancerous breast cell is on the far right-hand side, and that shows all of the estrogen hormones and growth factors that attach to receptors which fuel cell division and growth. So this shows breast cancer and what is happening here. Estrogen is what activates estrogen receptor alpha, which causes the multiplication of cancer. And estrogen receptor beta reverses this and has an anti-proliferative effect, so that the beta one does not cause the proliferation of cells. So the cancer that mainly is ductal cancer, which is highly proliferated, and estrogen receptor alpha is highly expressed at early stages. So for lobular breast cancer, it shows high levels of estrogen receptor alpha and beta, and the estrogen receptor alpha is present at advanced stages. So for estrogen receptor alpha, antagonist might be helpful in treating advanced lobular cancer and early stage of ductal cancer. So estrogen receptor alpha plays a major role in cancer, especially breast cancer for women. So yeah, this is for nerve damage, and estradiol is important in the central nervous system for diseases such as depression and anxiety. So activation of estrogen receptor alpha and beta, they can cause neuroprotective effect, which prevents and treats Alzheimer's disease. And the alpha receptor prevents and treats multiple sclerosis in animals usually. So the clinical applications in cardiovascular disease, estrogen receptor alpha is expressed in the endothelial cells, and it plays a major role in the effects of estrogens in the vascular endothelium. And activation of the alpha receptor and beta receptor, they both have beneficial effects that lower the blood pressure that is caused by vascular wall dilation. And for osteoporosis, so as the picture shows, there's a healthy bone compared to a osteoporosis bone, which has all these little tiny holes and that are very porous. So this is a major health problem associated with estrogen deficiency in postmenopausal women due to increase of bone reabsorption. And this is also a common issue for people that are calcium and vitamin D deficient. And estrogen, so it is important for bone homeostasis for men and women. So vitamin D is very important for this, and also estrogen. So long-term estrogen replacement therapy can raise levels of proliferation of breast and uterus through estrogen receptor alpha, which could increase the risk of cancer in the organs. So for menopause, estrogen receptor alpha causes cancer in most menopausal women. So this occurs after you are about 40, 45, and there are many studies being done to discover treatment for hot flashes, loss of bone density, and cardiovascular issues. And in the picture, it shows that this person experiences hot flashes, insomnia, vaginal dryness, bone loss, mood swings, depression, night sweats, and weight gain. So the estrogen receptor beta activators are possibly a good treatment than other non-specific estrogens. So as we have discussed today, estrogen is a sex hormone that binds to estrogen receptors. And as we saw in that gray area for one of the pictures, it showed the binding site and how estrogen was bound to the receptor, which ultimately causes the cell proliferation. And if there's too much, then that can be bad. And if there's not enough, that can also have negative effects. So two receptor subtypes, those are alpha and beta, which are the transcription factors, and they play a major role in the estrogen. Estrogen, the alpha receptor is discovered by Elwood Jensen. We discussed that, and in the 1900s, and the estrogen receptors are part of the endocrine system. Because estrogen is a hormone used for signal regulation and physiological processes, and there is potential cell proliferation causing breast cancer, mainly in postmenopausal women. And a few last points are estrogen receptor alpha structurally consists of 5 domains that each have a role in binding. So as we saw, there were A, B, C, D, E, and F, and E and F is the domain for binding. And we talked about how there's clinical applications in cancer, nerve damage, cardiovascular disease, and menopause were all clinical applications that estrogen receptor alpha and beta both play a role in. So here are my references, and I think that's all. Thanks for watching.